I hear my name before I see him. The voice cuts through the steady hum of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine, through the rustle of textbooks and the scrape of chairs against worn linoleum. It's a voice I haven't heard in 3 years, but my body recognizes it instantly. My shoulders tense. My coffee cup hovers halfway to my lips, forgotten. Elias. Not the way my professors say it, with careful pronunciation and academic distance. Not the way my roommate calls it across our dorm room, casual and friendly. This is different. This voice carries history, weight, recognition. It knows exactly who I am. I turn slowly, already dreading what I'll find. The campus cafe is crowded with the usual afternoon rush. Students clustered around small tables, laptops open, headphones dangling from ears. The late October light filters through tall windows, casting everything in amber and shadow. I scan the faces, searching for the source of that voice, and there he is. Carter. He's standing in line at the counter, maybe 20 feet away, but the distance feels both infinite and far too small. My breath catches in my throat. 3 years have changed him in ways I wasn't prepared for. The sharp edges that once defined him have softened somehow. His shoulders are broader now, filling out a navy sweater that looks expensive and comfortable at once. His hair is different too, no longer the aggressive buzz cut from high school, but longer, tousled in a way that seems effortless. He looks like someone who belongs here, among the brick buildings and ivy-covered walls of our university. He looks like someone who has never known what it feels like to be small. But I remember when he made me feel exactly that. The memories rise unbidden, sharp and immediate. The playground at Roosevelt Elementary, gravel digging into my palms as I picked myself up off the ground. The hallways of Jefferson Middle School, lined with lockers that rattled when bodies were shoved against them. Carter's laughter, bright and cruel, following me home like a shadow I couldn't shake. The way his friends would circle around me, their faces blurring together into a constellation of malice. But his voice always the clearest, the one that cut deepest. I was 10 when it started. He was 11, already tall for his age, already learning the particular kind of power that comes from making others smaller than yourself. I was an easy target, quiet, artistic, the kind of kid who spent recess reading instead of playing kickball. I wore my vulnerability like a sign pinned to my back, and Carter read it perfectly. The bruises faded. The words didn't. Now he's here, in my cafe, in my carefully constructed world, where I've spent 3 years learning to take up space again. Where I've made friends who don't know about the boy who used to corner me in empty classrooms. Where I've finally started to believe that maybe I deserve to be heard. Carter turns from the counter, scanning the room, and our eyes meet across the crowded space. For a moment, neither of us moves. I watch his face change, surprise giving way to something else, something I can't quite name. Recognition, yes, but something softer underneath it. Almost nervous. He doesn't look away. Instead, he starts walking toward me. My first instinct is to run. Every cell in my body screams at me to grab my bag, to push through the crowd, to disappear before he can reach me. But I'm frozen in place, 20 years old and suddenly feeling 12 again, trapped in the amber light of this October afternoon with nowhere to hide. He stops a few feet from my table, close enough that I can see the way his hands fidget at his sides, close enough that I notice the small scar above his left eyebrow that I don't remember from before. He's holding a coffee cup, and his knuckles are white around it. "Hey," he says, and his voice is quieter now, uncertain in a way that doesn't match the Carter from my memories. The boy I remember never hesitated, never second-guessed himself, never looked at me with anything resembling vulnerability. I don't respond immediately. I can't. Words feel dangerous right now, loaded with too much history, too much potential to detonate whatever fragile piece I've built for myself here. Instead, I study his face, looking for traces of the boy who haunts my dreams. He's there, in the line of his jaw, in the particular shade of green in his eyes, but he's different too. Older, obviously, but something else. Something in the way he holds himself, like he's carrying weight he didn't have before. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me," he continues when I don't speak. His voice wavers slightly. "I wouldn't blame you if you told me to leave." The old Elias, The 12-year-old boy who learned to make himself invisible would have done exactly that, would have mumbled something about needing to leave, would have packed up his things with shaking hands and fled. But I'm not that boy anymore. I've spent 3 years in therapy, 3 years learning that I don't have to carry other people's cruelty as my own shame, 3 years discovering that I have a voice and it's worth hearing. So instead of running, I look at him directly, really look at him, perhaps for the first time since we were children. "What do you want, Carter?" I ask, and I'm surprised by how steady my voice sounds. He shifts his weight from one foot to the other, and I realize he's as nervous as I am. Maybe more so. The realization is so unexpected that it almost makes me dizzy. Carter Morrison, nervous because of me. The same Carter Morrison who once made me afraid to walk to school alone. Could I sit down?" He asks. Just for a minute. I know I don't have the right to ask, but he trails off, leaving the sentence unfinished. I could say no. I should say no. Every rational part of my brain is screaming at me to protect myself, to maintain the boundaries I've worked so hard to build. But there's something in his expression that stops me. A vulnerability I never saw when we were kids, a raw honesty that catches me off guard. I gesture to the empty chair across from me without quite meaning to. He sits down carefully, like he's afraid any sudden movement might shatter whatever delicate truce we've stumbled into. He sets his coffee cup on the table, but doesn't drink from it. Instead, he looks at his hands, then back at me, then at his hand again. "I changed schools my junior year," he says quietly. "Moved in with my aunt in Portland. I know that doesn't excuse anything, doesn't make up for how I treated you. But I wanted you to know that I'm not. I'm not that person anymore. I want to laugh at the simplicity of it, at the idea that 3 years could erase a decade of learned fear." But something in his voice stops me. There's a rawness there, a genuine regret that I wasn't prepared for. The cafe continues to buzz around us, but our corner feels separate, isolated, like we're suspended in our own bubble of complicated history and impossible present moments. I watch him struggle with words, watch him fidget with his coffee cup, and I realize that he's as lost in this conversation as I am. "I was awful to you," he says finally, meeting my eyes. The words come out in a rush, like he's afraid he'll lose his nerve if he doesn't say them quickly. "I was cruel, and I was wrong, and I've regretted it every single day since. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve to ask. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry." The apology hangs in the air between us, heavy and unexpected. It's the apology 12-year-old me dreamed of, the words I used to imagine him saying in elaborate fantasies where justice finally came for the boy who made my life hell. But now that it's here, it feels strange and insufficient and somehow too big all at once. I don't know what to say to that. I tell him honestly. He nods like he expected as much. I know. I wouldn't know what to say either. I've thought about you a lot over the years. Wonder how you were doing. Hope you were okay. The admission surprises me. In all my imaginings of potential encounters with Carter Morrison, I never pictured him thinking about me, wondering about my well-being. In my mind, I had simply ceased to exist for him the moment he moved away. "Why now?" I ask. "Why tell me this now?" He's quiet for a long moment, staring into his untouched coffee. When he looks up, his eyes are different, sadder, somehow, but also more real. "Because I've been trying to figure out how to live with myself," he says simply, and I realized I couldn't do that without at least trying to make things right with the people I hurt. The honesty of it cuts through my defenses in a way I wasn't expecting. This isn't the Carter from my memories, sharp-edged and confident in his cruelty. This is someone else entirely, someone who seems as surprised to be having this conversation as I am. Around us, the cafe continues its afternoon rhythm. Students come and go, chairs scrape against floor, someone laughs too loudly at something on their phone. But here, at our small table by the window, time feels suspended. We sit in the amber light of October, two people trying to bridge a gap that once seemed unbridgeable, neither quite sure if it's possible, but somehow unable to stop trying. The silence stretches between us until Carter finally reaches for his coffee, taking a tentative sip like he's buying himself time. I watch his throat work as he swallows, watch the way his fingers curl around the ceramic mug. These small details feel important somehow, evidence that this moment is real, that we're both actually here. I've been at this university for 2 years now, and I've built something resembling a life for myself. It's a quiet life, perhaps smaller than what others might want, but it's mine. I have my corner table in the art studio where I spend most afternoons. Natural light streaming through tall windows as I lose myself in charcoal and graphite. I have Professor Martinez, who sees something in my work that I'm still learning to see in myself. I have my roommate Jamie, who dragged me to movie nights and doesn't ask why I sometimes flinch when people approach too quickly. It's a careful existence, built deliberately around the understanding that trust is earned slowly and safety is something you create for yourself. I've learned to speak up in seminars, to share my work in critiques, to take up the space I deserve. It took time, months of false starts and setbacks, but I found my voice here. Found a version of myself that isn't defined by what was done to me. And now Carter is here, disrupting the careful equilibrium I've spent years constructing. I study him as he sits across from me, trying to reconcile this person with my memories. The Carter I knew was all sharp angles and quick cruelty, the kind of boy who could identify weakness from across a playground and exploit it with surgical precision. He moved through the world like he owned it, surrounded by a constellation of followers who laughed at his jokes and competed for his attention. Even his kindnesses felt dangerous back then, strategic moves in a game I didn't understand. This Carter is different. There's something softer about the way he holds himself, less performative. His clothes are nice, the kind of casual expensive that speaks of comfort rather than display. A navy sweater that brings out his eyes, dark jeans that fit well without trying too hard. He looks like someone who belongs in spaces like this, among the Gothic architecture and manicured lawns of our campus. But it's more than just clothing. There's something in his posture, the way he keeps his hands visible on the table, the way he doesn't take up more space than necessary. Like he's learned to be conscious of the room he occupies. I realize I'm staring and look away, focusing instead on the dregs of my coffee. When I look back up, he's watching me with an expression I can't quite read. "I heard you were here," he says quietly. "At the university, I mean." My aunt mentioned it. She keeps in touch with some people from home. I wasn't sure if I'd run into you. The admission surprises me. I'd assumed this encounter was purely coincidental, that he'd been as shocked to see me as I was to see him. The idea that he knew I was here, that he's been aware of my presence on campus, makes something shift uncomfortably in my chest. "How long have you known?" I ask. "Since the beginning of the semester," he admits. "Maybe longer. I kept thinking I should reach out, but I didn't know how. Didn't know if you want to hear from me." He pauses, looking down at his hands. I wasn't sure I had the right to try. There's something about his honesty that catches me off guard. The Carter I remember never showed uncertainty, never questioned his right to anything. This version, hesitant, almost fragile, feels like a different person entirely. "What are you studying?" I ask, surprising myself with the question. It feels like such a normal thing to say, the kind of casual inquiry you might make with any fellow student. But nothing about this conversation is casual. "Political science," he says, and something like embarrassment crosses his face. "Student government, too. I know how that sounds, given who I used to be. But I'm trying to do something useful with it. Trying to make things better for people who don't have a voice." The irony isn't lost on either of us. The boy who once used his social power to tear others down is now claiming to advocate for the voiceless. I wait for the cynical part of me to scoff, to dismiss this as another performance. But something in his voice stops me. There's no grandiosity in the way he says it, no self-congratulation. If anything, he sounds almost ashamed. I don't respond immediately, and he fills the silence. "I know how hypocritical it must sound," he continues. "Trust me, I'm aware of the contradiction. But that's part of why I do it. Because I know what it feels like to be the person causing harm, and I never want to be that person again." His words settle between us like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that spread outward into silence. I find myself studying his face again, looking for cracks in whatever facade this might be. But all I see is earnestness, a kind of raw sincerity that makes my chest tighten. Around us, The cafe continues its afternoon rhythm. Someone laughs at a nearby table. A chair scrapes against the floor. The espresso machine hisses and gurgles. Normal sounds a normal day, but they feel distant, muffled by the strange intimacy of this conversation. "What about you?" Carter asks, and his voice is gentler now. "What do you study?" "Art," I say simply. "Studio art, mostly drawing and painting." He nods like this makes perfect sense. "You always drew, even back then. I remember you had this sketchbook you carried everywhere." The memory hits me unexpectedly. I did have a sketchbook in middle school, a beaten-up spiral notebook where I escaped during lunch periods and study halls. I'm surprised he noticed, surprised he remembered. In my memories of that time, I was invisible to him except when I served as a target. "You noticed that?" I ask. He looks uncomfortable, like he's revealed more than he intended. "I noticed a lot of things about you," he says quietly. "More than I should have, probably." There's something in the way he says it that makes my breath catch. An undercurrent I'm not sure I want to examine too closely. We sit in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken things heavy between us. "I should go," I say finally, though I'm not sure why. "My next class isn't for another hour." Carter nods, but he looks disappointed. "Of course. I'm sorry for taking up your time." He starts to stand, then hesitates. "Would it be okay if... Could I maybe see you again sometime? Just to talk?" I understand if the answer is no. I stare at him, this boy who was once my nightmare, now asking permission to exist in my space. The old me would have said no immediately, would have protected myself with distance and silence. But something about his careful politeness, his obvious effort to give me power in this moment, makes me pause. Maybe I say finally. "I'll think about it." Relief flashes across his face, quick and genuine. "Thank you," he says. "That's more than I deserve." He gathers his things and walks away, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and a head full of questions I'm not ready to answer. 3 days pass before I see him again. 3 days of carrying our conversation like a stone in my chest, turning his words over and over until they're worn smooth by repetition. I catch myself looking for him in crowds, scanning faces in lecture halls and dining commons with an attention that makes me uncomfortable. I tell myself I'm being cautious, staying alert for potential danger. But the truth is more complicated than that. I'm sketching in my usual spot in the library when he appears, hovering at the edge of my peripheral vision like he's afraid to come closer. The late afternoon light slants through tall windows, casting everything in gold and shadow. When I finally look up, he's standing a respectful distance away, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "I'm sorry," he says quietly. "I don't want to interrupt. I just saw you and thought, I hope maybe we could talk again." There's something almost fragile about the way he asks, like he's prepared for rejection, but hoping against it anyway. The old Elias would have felt powerful in this moment, would have savored having Carter Morrison ask him for something. But power feels different now than it did when I was 12 and powerless. Now it just feels heavy. I close my sketchbook and gesture to the empty chair across from me. He sits down carefully, the same deliberate movements I remember from the cafe. "What did you want to talk about?" I ask. He's quiet for a moment, and I watch him gather his thoughts. There's something different about him today. Less polished, more uncertain. His hair is slightly messed up, like he's been running his hands through it, and there are shadows under his eyes that suggest he's been sleeping as poorly as I have. "I wanted to explain," he says finally, "not to make excuses, but to help you understand who I was back then. Who I am now." I lean back in my chair, creating distance. "You don't owe me an explanation." "Maybe not," he says, "but I owe myself one. And maybe you deserve to know that it was never really about you." The words hang between us, loaded with implication. I feel something shift in my chest, a loosening of tension I didn't realize I was carrying. "My dad left when I was 9. He continues, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just disappeared one day while I was at school. Mom fell apart completely, started drinking, stopped working, stopped taking care of anything, including herself. I was angry all the time, at everything, but I couldn't be angry at home because everything there was already broken." He pauses, staring at his hands. "So I brought that anger to school instead. And you were. You were an easy target. Quiet, gentle, everything I felt like I couldn't be. It wasn't fair, and it wasn't right, but you became the place where I put all that rage, because I didn't know where else to put it. I listened to his words, feeling something fundamental shift in my understanding of our shared history. The Carter of my memories was all power and confidence, someone who hurt others because he could. This version, broken, searching for somewhere to put his pain, is harder to reconcile with the boy who made my childhood hell. That doesn't make it okay, I say quietly. No, he agrees immediately. It doesn't. Nothing makes it okay. But I needed you to know that it was never because there was something wrong with you. The problem was always me. We sit in silence for a moment, the weight of his confession settling between us. Around us, the library hums with quiet activity, pages turning, keyboards clicking, whispered conversations. But our corner feels separate, insulated by the gravity of what's being said. When did it change? I ask. When did you stop being angry? He considers this, tilting his head slightly. I don't know if I ever stopped being angry, he says. But I learned to be angry at the right things. At systems that fail kids like we were. At adults who don't protect the people they're supposed to protect. At myself, mostly. He looks up, meeting my eyes. When I moved in with my aunt, she got me into therapy, made it a condition of living with her. I fought it at first, but Dr. Chun, my therapist, she helped me understand that hurt people hurt people. That didn't excuse what I'd done, but it helped me figure out how to stop doing it. The phrase resonates in a way that surprises me. Hurt people hurt people. It's something my own therapist has said, something we've discussed in the context of healing and forgiveness. Hearing it from Carter feels like finding a bridge across a chasm I thought was uncrossable. I spent 2 years in therapy, he continues, learning how to process anger without destroying things, learning how to live with guilt without letting it paralyze me, learning how to make amends, even when, especially when, I wasn't sure I deserved forgiveness. His honesty is disarming. I find myself leaning forward slightly, drawn in despite myself. Is that what this is? I ask. Making amends? He shakes his head. Not just that. I mean, yes, I needed to apologize to you. But this is more than that. This is me hoping that maybe we could start over. Not pretend the past didn't happen, but build something new despite it. The word something hangs in the air between us, undefined but weighted with possibility. I feel my heartbeat quicken. What kind of something? I ask. I don't know, he admits. Friendship, maybe? If you're open to it. I know it's a lot to ask. I know you have every reason to say no. But I'd like to try, if you're willing. I study his face, looking for signs of deception, for the sharp edges I remember. But all I see is earnestness, vulnerability, hope tempered by the very real possibility of rejection. The rational part of my mind lists all the reasons this is a bad idea. He hurt me, deeply, repeatedly, for years. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. There are safer choices, easier paths, relationships that don't require this kind of excavation of old wounds. But there's something about his transformation that calls to the part of me that believes in second chances, in the possibility that people can grow beyond their worst moments. And if I'm honest, there's something else too, a curiosity about who he's become, about what friendship might look like between the boy who was hurt and the boy who did the hurting. Both of us grown now into something different. I could try, I say finally, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. But it would have to be slow. And if I change my mind, you can change your mind anytime, he says quickly. No questions asked. We stop whenever you want to stop. Relief flashes across his face, genuine and unguarded. Thank you, he says. Really. Thank you for giving me a chance I know I don't deserve. We're not there yet, I warn him. This isn't forgiveness. This is just willingness to see what happens. He nods solemnly. I understand. That's enough. That's more than enough. As we sit there in the golden library light, I feel something shift between us. Not healing. That will take much longer if it happens at all. But possibility. The tentative beginning of something neither of us can name yet, built on the uncertain foundation of shared honesty and the hope that people can become better than they once were. Our first real conversation happens 3 days later at a small table outside the campus coffee shop. November air carries the promise of winter, and we both wrap our hands around warm mugs like anchors against the cold. Carter seems nervous, checking his phone too often and stumbling over words that used to come easily to him. I find his uncertainty oddly comforting, proof that this matters to him, that he's not taking my willingness for granted. He tells me about his classes first, the safe territory of academic small talk, political theory and constitutional law, student government meetings that run too late, a professor who challenges everything Carter thought he knew about power and justice. I listen to the enthusiasm in his voice when he talks about policy proposals for better mental health resources on campus, about advocating for first-generation college students who feel lost in a system that assumes familiarity. There's genuine passion there, not the performative kind I remember from high school student council campaigns, but something deeper, something that seems to surprise him as much as it surprises me. "Your turn," he says, leaning back in his chair. "Tell me about your art." I hesitate. My artwork has always been deeply personal, a way of processing emotions I couldn't otherwise express. Sharing it feels vulnerable in a way that scares me, especially with him. But his attention is patient, expectant without being demanding. So, I find myself describing my latest series, charcoal drawings exploring the spaces between memory and truth. "I'm working on this piece about childhood," I say slowly, "about how we remember things differently than they actually were. How our perceptions shape reality, even when they're not entirely accurate." He goes very still. "Are you drawing about us? About what happened?" The question hangs in the cold air between us. I could lie, deflect, protect myself behind careful boundaries. Instead, I find myself nodding. Some of it, I admit. It's not. It's not about blame or anger anymore. It's about understanding how the same events can live so differently in different people's memories. He's quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. When he looks up, his eyes are bright with something that might be tears. "Could I see them sometime?" he asks. "The drawings, I mean. Only if you want to share them." "Maybe," I say. "When they're finished." We start meeting regularly after that. Not planned encounters, exactly, but a gradual rhythm that develops naturally. Coffee between classes, study sessions in the library where we work on separate assignments but share the comfortable silence. Carter introduces me to his friends gradually, testing the waters, and I'm surprised by how warmly they accept me. They're not the cruel pack followers I remember from our childhood. These are thoughtful people who seem to genuinely care about making the world better. More surprising still is how Carter talks about me when he thinks I'm not listening. I catch fragments of conversations, references to his friend from home, the artist who keeps him grounded. There's no hint of our complicated history in these mentions, just genuine affection and respect. One evening in late November, as we walk across campus after a student government meeting I'd attended out of curiosity, Carter stops abruptly on the path between dormitories. "Can I tell you something?" he asks, his breath visible in the cold air. I nod, pulling my jacket tighter against the wind. "I used to think about you," he says quietly, "even after I moved away, even before I understood why. You were always the one I remembered most clearly from home." There's something in his voice that makes my chest tighten, something unspoken but heavy with implication. "I remembered how you looked when you drew," he continues. "How focused you got, like the rest of the world just disappeared. I remembered your laugh too, the real one, not the nervous one you did when people were watching. I remembered you being kind to Jenny Morrison when she got sick in 3rd grade, even though she'd been mean to you the week before." I'm surprised he remembers Jenny Morrison at all, let alone that moment of childhood compassion I'd forgotten myself. "But mostly," he says, and his voice drops to almost a whisper, "I remembered that you were the only person who ever looked at me like you could see something good underneath all the anger. Even when I was being horrible to you, sometimes I'd catch you watching me like you were trying to figure out who I really was." The admission hits me like a physical blow. I do remember looking at him that way, trying to understand the contradiction between his cruelty and the flashes of something else I occasionally glimpsed. Even as a child, some part of me sensed that his anger was armor, protection against something I couldn't name. "I think that's why I hated you so much," he continues. "Because you really saw me, and I was terrified of what you might find. We stand there in the cold November evening, surrounded by the warm lights of dormitory windows and the distant sound of students laughing somewhere across the quad. The confession settles between us like snow, quiet and transformative. I don't know what to say to that. I tell him honestly. You don't have to say anything, he replies. I just needed you to know that even when I was being cruel, you mattered to me. Maybe especially then. Something shifts in my understanding of our entire history. The boy who tormented me wasn't indifferent. He was the opposite. He cared too much, felt too deeply, and didn't know how to process emotions that felt dangerous. We start walking again, our footsteps crunching on frost-covered grass. The silence between us feels different now, charged with new understanding. When our shoulders brush as we navigate the narrow path, neither of us pulls away. Later, lying in my dorm room bed and staring at the ceiling, I try to make sense of what's happening between us. Friendship feels too small a word for whatever this is becoming. There's something else growing in the spaces between our conversations, in the way he listens when I talk about my art, in the careful way he respects the boundaries I set while hoping I might choose to cross them. It terrifies me, this softening toward him, but it also feels inevitable, like a story that was always meant to unfold this way, despite all the pain that came before. Winter settles over campus like a held breath, transforming familiar paths into something magical and strange. Carter and I have fallen into an easy rhythm now. Study sessions that stretch late into the evening, walks between classes where our conversations range from academic stress to childhood memories we're both learning to reframe. The sharp edges of our history have softened into something more complex, more nuanced than simple forgiveness. It's during one of these walks, a week before finals, that everything changes. We're heading back from the library, our breath visible in the December air, when Carter stops suddenly outside my dormitory. The building looms above us, windows glowing warm against the winter darkness. Students pass by in small groups, laughing and complaining about upcoming exams. But Carter seems oblivious to everything except the words he's struggling to find. Elias, he says, and something in his voice makes me turn to face him fully. There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said weeks ago. The seriousness in his tone makes my chest tighten. I brace myself for disappointment, for the revelation that this friendship has been built on some foundation I don't understand. What is it? I ask. He runs a hand through his hair, a gesture I've come to recognize as his tell when he's nervous. The streetlight catches the angles of his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. The reason I was so cruel to you, he says slowly. The real reason, not just the anger and the broken home and all the other things that were true, but not the whole truth. I wait, watching him gather courage for whatever comes next. It was because I had feelings for you. He continues, the words coming out in a rush. Even as a kid, I knew there was something different about the way I saw you, the way I watched you. I didn't have words for it then. I barely have words for it now, but I was drawn to you in a way that terrified me. The confession hits me like cold water, shocking and disorienting. I feel my world tilt slightly, all my assumptions about our shared history shifting into new configurations. I was 11 years old in a small town where being different meant being dangerous, he continues. Where boys who liked boys learned to hide it or face consequences I wasn't brave enough to consider. So I turned those feelings into something else, something that felt safer. His voice drops to barely above a whisper. I convinced myself that what I felt was hatred, that the reason I couldn't stop thinking about you, couldn't stop watching you, was because I wanted to hurt you. It was easier than admitting the truth. I stare at him, trying to process what he's telling me. The playground cruelties, the hallway taunts, the particular viciousness of his attention, all of it recontextualized by this revelation. The boy who made my life, how was fighting his own demons, wrestling with feelings he couldn't name or accept. You were always the one I remembered most, he says, echoing his words from weeks earlier, but with new weight now. The one I hated because I didn't know why I cared so much. Because caring about another boy felt like admitting something about myself I wasn't ready to face. The winter air feels thin, inadequate. I find myself struggling to breathe, normally, as the implications of his confession wash over me. Everything I thought I knew about us, about him, about the nature of what we endured together has been turned inside out. When did you figure it out? I ask, my voice barely steady. Therapy, mostly, he says with a bitter laugh. Dr. Chun had a way of asking questions that forced me to examine things I'd buried. She helped me understand that cruelty and desire can live in the same space, that fear can make us hurt the people we care about most. He looks directly at me then, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm not telling you this because I expect anything from you. I know the damage is done. I know I have no right to ask for more than the friendship you've already given me. But I couldn't keep pretending that what's between us now is separate from what was between us then. I feel something crack open in my chest, some carefully maintained wall crumbling under the weight of his honesty. The past and present collide in ways I'm not prepared for, pain and tenderness merging into something I can't name. All those years, I say slowly, working through the revelation. All that cruelty, it was because I was a scared kid who didn't know how to handle feelings that felt dangerous, he finishes. Because I'd rather be the boy who hurt you than the boy who wanted you. The word wanted hangs between us, loaded with implications neither of us is ready to fully examine. But it's there now, spoken and real, changing the texture of everything. I think about the times I caught him watching me, the intensity in his gaze that I mistook for malice. I think about the particular attention he paid to me, singling me out from all the other potential targets. What I interpreted as pure cruelty was something far more complicated, desire twisted into violence, love expressed as its opposite, because the truth felt too dangerous to speak. And now, I ask quietly, what do you feel now? He's quiet for a long moment, and when he speaks, his voice is barely audible over the winter wind. Now I feel everything I was too afraid to feel then, he says, but I also feel the weight of what I did with those feelings. The harm I caused because I was a coward. He steps closer, close enough that I can see the vulnerability written across his features. Close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from his body despite the cold. I care about you, Elias, he says, and the simple honesty of it takes my breath away. I care about you in ways that scare me still, but not because of what it means about who I am, because of what it means about what I destroyed. The confession settles between us like snow, quiet and transformative. I understand now why our friendship has felt charged with something unnameable, why every casual touch sends electricity through my nervous system. The chemistry I've been trying to ignore, trying to rationalize as simple human connection, has roots that reach back to our shared childhood. Standing there in the winter darkness, I realize that the boy who hurt me and the man who's asking for forgiveness aren't different people. They're the same person at different stages of understanding himself, of finding the courage to name what he feels. The revelation should terrify me. Instead, it feels like the final piece of a puzzle I've been unconsciously assembling for months, the missing context that makes everything else make sense. I don't sleep that night. I lie in my narrow dorm bed, staring at the ceiling while Carter's words replay in my mind like a song I can't stop hearing. The room feels too small, too warm, despite the winter wind rattling my window. My roommate, Jamie, sleeps soundly in the bed across from me, oblivious to the way my world has been quietly rearranged. By morning, I've worn grooves in my thoughts, circling around Carter's confession until I'm dizzy with the implications. Part of me wants to be angry at him for burdening me with this knowledge, at myself for the way my heart stuttered when he said he cared about me. But anger feels inadequate now, too simple for the complexity of what we've uncovered. I skip my morning classes and walk instead, letting the December cold clear my head. The campus is beautiful under its blanket of frost, trees etched silver against the gray sky. I find myself at the art building without consciously deciding to go there, my feet carrying me to the one place that has always felt safe. The studio is empty this early, winter light streaming through tall windows onto paint-stained tables and half-finished canvases. I sit at my usual spot and pull out my sketchbook, but my hands shake too much to draw. Instead, I just sit with the familiar smells of turpentine and charcoal, trying to make sense of everything I'm feeling. Carter finds me there 2 hours later. "I heard you miss contemporary art theory," he says softly from the doorway. "Professor Martinez was asking about you." I don't turn around immediately. I'm not ready to see his face, not ready to navigate whatever expression he might be wearing after last night's revelation. "I needed to think," I say finally. He steps into the studio carefully, like he's afraid sudden movements might spook me. I can hear his footsteps on the paint-splattered floor, can feel him settling into the chair beside me, without invitation, but without presumption either. "I'm sorry," he says quietly, "for telling you, for putting that burden on you when you never asked for it." I close my sketchbook and finally look at him. He looks as tired as I feel, shadows under his eyes that suggest he slept as poorly as I did. There's vulnerability in his posture, a careful uncertainty that makes him seem younger than his 21 years. "I'm not sorry you told me," I say, surprising myself with the honesty. "I needed to know." It changes everything and nothing at the same time. He nods like he understands, though I'm not sure I understand it myself. We sit in silence for a while, watching dust motes dance in the winter sunlight. The studio feels separate from the rest of the world, insulated by creativity and honesty and the particular intimacy that comes from sharing difficult truths. "Can I ask you something?" I say eventually. "Anything. When you look at me now, what do you see?" He's quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserves. "I see someone who survived something they shouldn't have had to survive," he says slowly. "Someone who took the worst thing I could give them and transformed it into art, into empathy, into the kind of strength that lets them sit here talking to me instead of rightfully telling me to disappear forever." He pauses, his voice dropping lower. "I see someone beautiful inside and out. Someone I don't deserve to know, let alone care about. Someone I'm grateful for every day, even knowing how much I've lost the right to that gratitude." The words settle into the quiet space between us, honest and raw. I feel something shift in my chest, some final wall crumbling under the weight of his sincerity. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" I ask. He nods, though there's fear in his eyes. "I see someone who was broken as a child and didn't know how to handle it gracefully. Someone who made terrible choices and has spent years learning to live with the consequences. But I also see someone who did the hard work of changing, who went to therapy and faced ugly truths about himself and chose to become better." I turn in my chair to face him fully. "I see someone who advocates for people who don't have voices because he remembers what it felt like to feel voiceless. Someone who treats me with more care and respect than most people who never hurt me at all." Carter's eyes are bright with tears he's trying not to shed. "Most of all," I continue, "I see someone I'm afraid to trust, but want to trust anyway. Someone who scares me and comforts me in equal measure. Someone who makes me feel things I'm not sure I'm ready to feel." The admission hangs in the air between us, loaded with implication. Carter goes very still, like he's afraid to breathe too loudly and break whatever spell we've cast. "What kind of things?" he asks, his voice barely a whisper. I think about lying, about protecting myself behind careful boundaries. But something about this moment, the winter light, the honest vulnerability we've created, makes deception feel impossible. "The same kinds of things you feel," I say quietly. "The scary ones. The ones that make this more than friendship." He reaches for my hand, then, slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I don't, his fingers intertwine with mine, warm and slightly trembling. The touch sends electricity up my arm, confirmation of what we've both been afraid to name. "I am terrified, I admit, of trusting you with this, of letting you close enough to hurt me again." "I'm terrified too," he says, "of not being worthy of what you're offering, of somehow destroying this like I destroyed everything else. But you're willing to try?" I ask. He lifts our joined hands and presses them against his chest, over his heart. I can feel it beating fast and irregular, proof of his nerves. "I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying, if you'll let me." The words are a promise and a question all at once. I look at our hands, pale fingers woven together against the dark fabric of his sweater, and I realize that this moment is a crossroads. I can choose safety, can pull back and preserve the careful distance that has protected me for so long. Or I can choose to believe that people can change, that love can grow from the most unlikely soil. Yes, I say, and the word feels like stepping off a cliff into open air. Yes, I want to try. Relief floods his face, bright and unguarded. He brings our joined hands to his lips and presses a soft kiss to my knuckles, a gesture so tender it makes my breath catch. Thank you, he whispers against my skin. Thank you for giving us a chance. Spring arrives slowly, then all at once. The campus transforms from winter's stark beauty into something softer, more alive. Cherry blossoms bloom in pale clouds along the pathways where Carter and I walk together now, no longer careful to maintain distance, no longer afraid of what our closeness might mean. It's been 3 months since that December morning in the art studio, 3 months of learning to navigate this fragile thing we've built between us. We move carefully still, both of us hyper-aware of how precious and improbable this is. Trust, we've discovered, isn't something you decide to have. It's something you practice day by day, choice by choice. The library has become our sanctuary. We claim the same table by the tall windows every Tuesday and Thursday evening, spreading textbooks and notebooks across the scarred wood surface. Carter works on policy briefs while I sketch, occasionally looking up to find him watching me with an expression that still makes my breath catch. The intensity is different now, no longer frightening but warm, protective, reverent. Tonight, as April rain patters against the windows, I'm working on the final piece in my childhood series, a drawing I've been avoiding for weeks. Carter notices my hesitation, the way I keep starting and stopping, erasing lines before they're fully formed. What is it? He asks quietly, setting down his pen. I turn the sketchbook toward him, revealing the half-finished image. It's us, or rather, it's the memory of us, 2 boys on a playground, one standing over the other. But something in the composition suggests a different story than the one we lived. The standing boy's hand is extended, not in threat, but in offering. The boy on the ground is looking up not with fear, but with understanding. It's not what happened, I say softly. It's what could have happened if we'd known then what we know now. Carter stares at the drawing for a long time, his fingers tracing the air above the charcoal lines without quite touching the paper. It's beautiful, he says finally. You're rewriting history. Not rewriting, I correct. Reclaiming. Taking back the narrative from the fear and the pain and making it into something else. He looks at me, then with an expression I've learned to recognize. The one that means he's seeing all of me, not just the surface but the depths, the complicated geography of who I am. You amaze me, he says simply, the way you transform things, the way you find light in places where there shouldn't be any. Around us, the library hums with its familiar evening energy. Students bent over books, whispered conversations, the soft scratch of pens on paper. But our corner feels separate, intimate, sacred in its own quiet way. Carter reaches across the table and takes my hand, a gesture that has become natural now, no longer charged with the electric uncertainty of those first touches. His thumb traces patterns on my palm while I work, adding shading to the drawing that transforms it from memory into hope. I finish the piece as the library announces its closing time, setting down my charcoal and flexing fingers cramped from concentration. Carter has been dozing lightly in his chair, head pillowed on his folded arms, his breathing deep and even. In sleep, he looks younger, more vulnerable. The careful composure he maintains during waking hours is softened into something unguarded. I study his face in the lamplight, the strong line of his jaw, the dark lashes against his cheek, the small scar above his eyebrow that I've never asked about. This is the boy who once made my life hell, now the man who texts me good morning every day and remembers how I take my coffee and listens to my theories about art with genuine interest. The transformation seems impossible, miraculous even. But watching him sleep, I understand that it's not magic that changed him. It's work. Years of therapy and self-reflection and the conscious choice to become better than he was. And maybe that's more beautiful than magic. Maybe choosing to grow, choosing to heal, choosing to love despite the damage we've all sustained. Maybe that's the most miraculous thing of all. Carter stirs as I close my sketchbook, blinking awake with the disoriented sweetness of someone pulled gently from dreams. Time to go, he asks, voice rough with sleep. Time to go, I confirm. We pack our things in comfortable silence, the ritual of notebooks and pens and half-empty coffee cups. Carter stretches, rolls his shoulders, smiles at me with the particular warmth he reserves for moments when we're alone. Walk me home, I ask, though we both know he will. He always does now, has made it a habit that started with politeness and became something more, a way of extending our time together, of not quite wanting to say goodbye. The rain has stopped, leaving the campus glistening under streetlights. We walk slowly, in no hurry to reach my dormitory. Our shoulders brush with each step, a gentle rhythm that has become its own form of conversation. At my door, Carter pulls me close, wrapping his arms around me in the embrace that has become our evening ritual. I breathe in the scent of his cologne, mixed with coffee and the particular smell that is just him, and I feel something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or simply the quiet satisfaction of being exactly where I belong. I love you, he murmurs against my hair, words he's been saying for weeks now, but that still make my heart stutter. I love you too, I reply, and mean it completely. Later, lying in my narrow dorm bed while Jamie sleeps across the room, I think about the drawing I finished tonight. Two boys, rewriting the story of their meeting. A hand extended in friendship instead of cruelty. Understanding instead of fear. It's not the truth of what happened, but it's the truth of what we've built from the wreckage. We can't change our past, but we can choose what it means. We can decide whether our history defines us or whether we define it. Outside my window, the campus sleeps under spring stars. Somewhere across the quad, Carter is probably lying in his own bed, thinking similar thoughts. Tomorrow we'll meet for coffee before classes, and he'll smile at me like I'm something precious, and I'll remember again how far we've both traveled to get here. A past rewritten, a future no longer tentative but certain, unfolding one careful choice at a time.